The story helped to focus public anger over the terrorist attack.
Venice residents like Ralph Hargis know that the arrival of the applications couldn't have stopped September 11th, but they believe a more diligent INS should have.
Someone's dragging their feet somewhere.
They let them into this country. We paid the price.
Still, some people in Venice had other ideas about where the real blame lay.
When people in town found out that these people had been in our midst right here, I mean, 3 of them.
They wanted to go burn down the airport.
The INS debacle left even mainstream reporters skeptical, if not downright embarrassed.
Well, maybe I missed this while I was shaking my head, but explain again, because I read it. I'm not sure I understand what the INS is saying here. At some point, fairly recently, somehow these pages got stuck in an envelope and sent down to Florida. Now, did anybody look at them?
Apparently not. You'd think those names, Atta al-Shehi, which were in the news probably more than anybody's, would stand out.
More hard-hitting American journalism.
We think they should take a look at what people who know him have got to say. For starters, he has a pretty tarnished local history. Coy Jacob owns an aviation business right next to Decker's at the Venice airport.
He was operating a flight school, an unsuccessful flight school in Naples. He had some run-ins with the FAA. I think he had lost his license or had been reprimanded.
Also, it turns out he's something of a deadbeat. Bob Mudge writes for the local Venice Gondolier.
I don't think I knew anything at all about Rudy, even his taking over of Huffman, until April or maybe early May of last year, when he missed a rent payment. Or actually, I found out he was behind on several months' rent. The only, at that time, fixed-base operator at the Venice Municipal Airport was, I think at that time, 3 months behind in his rent, and had gotten a demand letter and was being threatened with eviction.
There was even something strangely puzzling about the circumstances under which Deckers had purchased Huffman Aviation.
They did no due diligence, the best of my knowledge. It's a cardinal no-no. I mean, you just don't come in and buy a business like that. They blew into town. They were here a day or two, met with Stan Huffman. He named a number. They said yes, wrote him a check. Stan left. They're here. And then they notified the city of Venice what they did after the fact. And it was a shock to everybody at the airport. In fact, the city council and the city attorney, and I think even for that matter, the manager of the airport wasn't even aware of the fact, and that's a criteria. You can't transfer properties at this airport and most federally funded airports without the governing authority's approval.
The city of Venice wasn't the only government agency eager to bend the rules for Rudy Deckers.
Rudy is not a U.S. national citizen. He's not national. I don't believe he's a U.S. citizen. And historically, the FAA is pretty picky about who they allow to even own November registered or U.S. registered airplanes. Non-U.S. citizen cannot register an airplane in the United States, can't own it in the United States.
And yet, as we will soon learn, Deckers owned not just U.S. registered airplanes, but a U.S. chartered airline as well.
He was involved in the startup of Flair, I think it was called, which was Florida Airline, simply. And I know he had a lot of problems with that. I think it was briefly in service, but Flair's period of service was pretty brief. There's a level beyond which we don't really go into for a lot of reasons. We don't have the staff. Stories get beyond our scope. I've heard a lot of things about why that airline went into trouble, and that there were a lot of financial problems, and I've heard problems with people not getting paid. I had some discussions with Deckers about that at some point, and he was blaming it on I forget who.
And that's when we began to learn about Rudy Decker's shadowy financing.
And what I heard was just that he had a backer in Naples that was backing him financially. That the money that he had, that he, in a sense, flaunted, was not even his money. He was just the front man for the man that had the money.
The only way I could explain it, and the only way it was explained to me, was that Rudy Deckers was running an unsuccessful business in Naples. He was not making any money. He had he didn't have the best of reputation.
Somehow, Rudy Decker's financial profile changed overnight.
Just about a year earlier, he asked me for a ride from Venice to Naples, which is an airplane ride, which is maybe a 20-minute ride, and didn't have the money to buy gas. I mean, I said, yeah, I'll take you down there with one of my pilots if you buy the gas. He didn't have the money to buy gas for an airplane to go down and back. And then he shows up a year later and plops $1.7 million or $1.8 million or $2 million on the table as if it was paper money.
Tom Hammersley was chief flight instructor at Florida Flight Training, the other Dutch-owned flight school at the Venice airport. They trained the terrorist pilot at the controls of the plane which crashed in western Pennsylvania.
I know that he wanted to buy out everybody on the block, so to speak, and have a monopoly on the airport. That was one of his goals. And I really didn't see it as anything else but a Dutch man with a French complex called a Napoleon complex.
So 2 Dutch nationals had purchased flight schools at the Venice airport in the year before the terrorists began to arrive. Local observers thought that was one Dutch boy too many for coincidence.
It's kind of odd because the only other flight school in town is owned by Arnie Kuthoff, and he's Dutch. I mean, the odds of that are pretty slim. And
each of those flight schools was purchased in the same year, a year before the terrorists showed up.
About the same time period, yeah.
I've heard a lot of rumors that I haven't been able to substantiate about connections between them and other businesses here and entities and agencies outside the area. It certainly is something you'd have to say is an interesting coincidence.
The notion that it's just coincidence that dozens of Arab student pilots learned to fly at 2 separate Dutch-owned flight schools at this tiny airport is called the magic Dutch boy theory.
Just like the magic bullet theory in the Kennedy assassination, where a magic bullet was the only way the FBI could concoct a scenario which let them apply a lone nut gunman tag to Lee Harvey Oswald. The FBI's explanation of the conspiracy leading to the September 11th disaster only flies through similarly twisted logic. Consider both pilots who guided planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center trained at Dutch national Rudy Decker's Huffman Aviation, which he had purchased the year before the terrorists began to arrive. The terrorist duo practicing touch-and-goes on Florida's Gulf Coast were soon joined by a third student terrorist pilot, Siad El-Jarrah, the Lebanese national, at the controls of the plane which crashed in western Pennsylvania, making it a terrorist trifecta out at the Venice airport. He trained at the Florida Flight Training Center, newly purchased by yet another Dutch national. 2 Dutch boys buying adjacent flight schools, which shortly thereafter get overrun by terrorists, is one damn Dutch boy too many, one Southern lawman told us. It's untidy. Making this even more suspicious is the fact that both Deckers and Krudoff insist they only met in Venice. Turns out they're lying.
I was also the chief flight instructor down at Florida Flight Training Center, which is on the Venice airport. It's at the opposite end. And I knew Rudy Deckers. My former employer, Arne Krutoff and Rudy Deckers, are both Dutch. They go back a long time.
We wanted to ask Arnie Krutoff about this, but when he visited his flight school, he tried to threaten us. It didn't work.
You're lucky to sit where you're sitting, because right now if you sat in Rudy's office, or you wouldn't be.
One common link between the 2 men is a German national named Pascal Schreier, who recruited students for both men in, are you ready for this? Hamburg, Germany.
I know Pascal Schreier. I mean, I worked with him as part of Florida Flight Training Center. He's a German boy and did a lot of recruiting students over in Europe, sending them over to Arne.
The 2 Venice Dutch boys run supposedly competing flight schools, but strangely, Pascal Schreier has been in business with both of them. According to the French newspaper Le Monde, Swiss police questioned Osama bin Laden's older brother, Yeslam, a key figure in the family's business empire, because one of his companies, Avcon Air Charter, just happened, as they say, to have offered flight training to clients at the Venice flight schools attended by some of the hijackers.